Hi, I'm Brenda, and this is Anne, and we're from Loving Spoonfuls, the Grow Project.
Today we're going to be talking about growing good food. We have a few videos exploring growing food in lots of different ways depending on what materials we have on hand. So let's start with the assumption that we have no garden seeds. That's okay, we can be creative. If you look in your kitchen, there's probably something that will grow into a food plant. So for example, do you have any dry beans that you use for cooking? If so, you could try germinating some, the way Brenda showed us in our last video. I tried that with these chickpeas and lentils, and this is the result I got. So these seedlings are about 2 weeks old, and they will produce food this year. If you want to try it at home, I would say go for it, but just be warned that they take up a fair amount of space and they produce a very little amount of food. But it's fun to try new things. Does anybody like citrus fruits? Oranges or lemons or clementines? Most of those seeds will germinate as well. So here are some plants that I've grown using seeds from grocery store fruit. Here we have a grapefruit, and we can see the seed is just starting to germinate, and this is what the plant looks like after about a year. You can do the same thing with lemon, with mandarin, and I've also done that with date and passion fruits as well. If you want to try with dates, I hope you're going to be prepared to be patient. This is about 3 years old. And I've been soaking a date seed for over a month, and you can see it's just starting to germinate, but it's still fun. So these are all tropical plants. I don't expect to get any fruit from them in Canada, although you never know. Sometimes lemon and lime trees will produce fruit in Canadian homes, so I'm not giving up hope. But either way, they make great houseplants, and it's really interesting to see what food plants from far away look like. We can also try germinating seeds from Canadian-grown fruit, of course. Apples or pears or peaches. Just keep in mind with those ones that the seeds are adapted to going through a cold winter before germinating in the spring. So if you want to grow them, there's an extra step involved of putting those seeds in the refrigerator. But we go into more detail on that in our learning module. Sometimes you don't even need seeds to grow food plants. Some vegetable scraps will grow into a whole new plant. Let's take celery, for example. Very nice. What we can do with celery is cut off the base about 5 centimeters up from the bottom. And we usually don't even eat this part, so that's okay. What we do is we put it in a shallow dish. We fill it with some water. So it goes about 2/3 of the way up the celery base. And that's about it. We leave it in a warm, sunny spot. We change the water every couple days, and eventually a whole new celery plant will grow. And here's an example of a celery that's just starting to regrow. We can do exactly the same thing with head lettuce, like romaine lettuce, and even with things like green onion. You plant the white base into water, and this is how much it's grown in just a couple days. Now, how about this? Does this look familiar to anybody? A lot of us have had potatoes sprouting in the back of a cupboard at some point. You can plant them to grow more potatoes. You can even cut it in half or quarters, and each one of those parts will grow a whole potato plant. Just make sure you have at least one sprouting eye on each part that you plant. All of these vegetables, you can either leave in their water and just sort of graze on them as you like. You can plant them into a pot, or you can plant them into a garden if you have one. So there we go, fresh produce without leaving your home. Good luck with your own growing adventures. We'd love it if you could share what you try and how it works for you.
Now that we know we have some options on where to get seeds, let's think about how we can plant them. In the last video, I showed you how to germinate seeds, and today I'd like to show you how to make some simple pots to put those seeds into from things that you have at home. These pots are going to be able to go right into the garden or into a larger pot. Many times, gardeners like to start seeds inside before planting them into the garden so that they're actually putting a small plant into the soil instead of just seeds. This is a great head start for many plants that like a lot of heat to do really well and usually get planted in late May or early June. Everything that I'm going to show you today is explained in step-by-step instructions on the Homemade Plant Pots page in Module 2. So let's get started. Anybody else like eggs? I love them. And there's a couple of good reasons why we love them in the garden. The eggshell actually makes a great plant pot, and when you put it into the soil, the calcium from the eggshell will help lots of plants grow. So we're going to crack our egg near the top so that we have more than half of the eggshell for our plant pot. Many instructions say to put a hole in the bottom, but then there are the ones that say it's not necessary. It sounds like a good idea to me, but it can be a bit tricky to get that hole in the bottom of the eggshell. I'm going to put my hole in the bottom with the end of a straight pin. I'm going to press down gently and turn it just a little bit, and it will make a nice hole. It's okay if it does crack it, because all that means is that you'll have extra food to share with somebody for lunch. So once you've got your hole in the bottom, you need to wash the eggshell out so that all the traces of the egg are gone. And this is a great time to be able to make a fun design on your eggshell, like these here, these ones we have done. And it's also a good time if you wanted to dye your eggshell. And I've included instructions about how to dye eggshells on the plant page in Module 2. I've washed out this eggshell, so now it's ready for some soil. I'm going to put potting soil inside so that it's about 3/4 full. Now the seeds that you want to put into an eggshell pot need to be fairly small. So I'm going to use seeds from the lettuce plant that Anne showed us last time we were speaking with you. So I'm going to just sprinkle some seeds on the top, gently press them down into the soil, and give them a nice water. So I'm going to put it in a nice sunny location. I know you have lots of these around your house, and I bet you never thought that you could make a pot out of them. But using a ruler and a marker, you can easily put 4 marks on your toilet paper roll, about 3 centimeters from the bottom. You're going to take your scissors and carefully cut right up to the mark. Now you can fold those flaps down, and you will have a nice way to make a bottom for your toilet paper roll. You can fill it with your soil about 3/4 full again, and you could plant another kind of seed in there. All of your plant pots need a sunny location in your house, and they'll need some water. You need to check them every day to make sure they're damp. Your spray bottle is going to work really well for that. Here are some other things that also can be turned into plant pots. This was a yogurt container. We've got a coconut shell. We've even used an orange peel to plant some seeds into. So there's lots of things that you can do. Good luck with making your homemade plant pots. Sarah's going to talk to you now about how to use different containers to grow flowers and vegetables. Happy growing, and I'll see you next time.
Hi there, I'm Sarah, and I'm part of the grow team at Spoonful. So we just heard some really cool ways to experiment and grow food at home, and I wanted to talk to you about one more, which is growing food in containers when you don't have a garden. So it's really pretty incredible how much food people can produce on balconies and on porches and even indoors when they're growing food in containers. But there's a few important tricks to remember when doing so. So the first is that some crops grow really well in smaller containers, while some need bigger containers to grow well, which makes sense because some crops are bigger than others. So things like lettuces, radishes, herbs, and other greens can grow well in smaller containers. Things like carrots, beans, kale, and beets need a medium-sized container to grow well in, so at least 1 foot by 1 foot in size. And then for your larger crops like potatoes, squash, peppers, and tomatoes, they need bigger containers to grow in. If you're growing tomatoes as well, definitely buy bush or determinate tomatoes, and that way they won't grow too big for your container. The next thing to think about is your containers. So obviously we see here is you don't need to go out and buy containers. You can use recycled ones from home just fine. The only thing you need to do is definitely wash them out well. Then you're going to poke a few holes in the bottom, and you can do that with a drill or a hammer and nail. And then you're going to line it with some rocks, and that will make sure your plant gets really nice and good drainage. The next step after rocks is some soil. So my mix is normally 1/3 compost to 2/3 soil. I mix that together and make it nice and wet, and then put it in the container, and then you're good to go. So today I'm going to plant a little bean seed in here, and then cover it up with some soil and give it a good water. So containers really like to be watered deeply. So to do this, I water both from the top and from the bottom. And when plants are growing past their first stage, I do this at least twice a week. When they're babies, do it a little bit more. And just if you're wondering, just put your hand in the soil and see how wet it is, and then water appropriately. The final thing is where to put these. So if you have a spot outdoors that has 6 hours of sunlight, that's ideal. If you have a spot that has a little bit less sunlight, that's okay. I would just grow those colder crops like the lettuces and greens and herbs. And then finally, if you don't have a spot outdoors, that's okay too. Put your plant in the sunniest spot that you have in your house by a windowsill, and you should be good to grow some food. So now that you've learned all about growing food in these containers, and from Ann and Brenda, we're gonna show you in our next video all about growing food in gardens and in raised beds, and from a couple of local farmers. So thank you so much.